The rock beneath your feet is older than anything you have ever touched. You do not know this in the way you know a fact, you feel it, somewhere below thought, the way you feel the depth of water when you stand at the ocean's edge. The stone is dark and smooth, and it has been here, in one form or another, for longer than the word ancient can meaningfully contain. Longer than the trees. Longer than the fish. Longer than the first cell that divided and became two cells in warm dark water, and those two became four, and those four became something the universe had never seen before. You are standing at the edge of a story that begins before stories existed. Before any creature had eyes to see the world or ears to hear it or a mind to hold it. The earth was already old before the first life appeared. And when life finally came, it was so small, so quiet, so patient, bacteria in hot ocean vents, mats of green on tidal flats, clouds of spores drifting over bare rock, that you could have stood upon it and seen nothing. Just stone. Just water. Just sky. Tonight, you are going to travel back through all of it. Not to the age of dinosaurs, that story comes later, much later, but to the long, extraordinary, mostly silent world that existed before them. Billions of years of Earth. Hundreds of millions of years of strange and beautiful life. Worlds that no human eye ever witnessed, reconstructed now from rock and chemistry and the patient work of science, offered to you tonight as a place to rest. A deep place. A quiet place. A place where time moves differently, where a million years can feel like a breath, and a breath can feel like a million years. Close your eyes, if you have not already. Let the night settle around you. And let yourself go back, not to childhood, not to last week, not to anywhere you have been before, but to the beginning. Or as close to the beginning as any story can reach. Welcome to Jurassic Sleep, where ancient worlds of wonder await to guide you into peaceful slumber. Tonight we will journey not to the age of dinosaurs, but far deeper, to the strange and beautiful worlds that existed long before the first dinosaur ever drew breath. After our story concludes, you will hear soothing sounds that will continue throughout the night, and there will be no advertisements to disturb your rest. Now let yourself settle, and let us begin. If you enjoy listening to sleepy prehistoric stories like this, subscribe. I post stories like this weekly. You are resting now. Your body is heavy, pleasantly so, the way a body feels after a long day of gentle effort. The light is low. The room is quiet. And somewhere beneath you, beneath the building, beneath the soil and the foundations, beneath the bedrock itself, the earth is holding you the way it has always held every living thing, with complete, unthinking patience. The earth is 4.5 billion years old. The dinosaurs appeared approximately 230 million years ago. That means the earth existed for more than 4 billion years before the first dinosaur stood on its surface. 4 billion years of history. 4 billion years of transformation. 4 billion years of life evolving, experimenting, dying, beginning again, and again, and again. The dinosaurs are famous. They fill museums and films and the imaginations of children everywhere. But they arrived so late in the story. They are almost a footnote, if you think about it in the right proportions. Tonight's story lives in all the chapters that came before them. It begins in fire and rock. It moves through the first ocean, the first cell, the first creature with eyes. It visits worlds of enormous insects and coal forests and shallow tropical seas teeming with life unlike anything alive today. It ends in the strange twilight of the period just before the dinosaurs rose to dominance, the Triassic world, where the dinosaurs existed but were not yet the rulers they would become. This is not a story about violence or extinction, though both things happened. It is a story about time. About patience. About the extraordinary richness of a planet that has been alive, in various forms, in various expressions, for almost as long as the solar system itself has existed. Every creature in tonight's story is your ancestor, in one sense or another. The oxygen in your lungs was produced by bacteria that lived 2 billion years before you. The calcium in your bones was forged in the heart of a dying star. You are a continuation of something ancient beyond imagination. Tonight is a chance to feel that. Not to think about it, to feel it. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts grow loose and unhurried. The story is very long and very gentle, and there is no need to hold on to any particular part of it. You can simply let it move through you, the way water moves through stone, slowly, quietly, leaving something behind that you may not even be able to name. Just a feeling. A sense of depth. A sense that the world is older and stranger and more full of wonder than ordinary waking life tends to suggest. We begin at the very beginning. As close to the beginning as we can reach. 4.5 billion years ago, there is no ground to stand on. There is no sky to look up at. There is no water, no stone, no silence. There is only heat, extraordinary, planetary heat, and the slow gravitational gathering of rock and gas and ice and dust into the sphere that will eventually become the world you know. This is the Hadean Eon. Its name comes from Hades, the Greek underworld. The name is appropriate. This early Earth is a place of molten stone, of surfaces too hot to touch, of skies thick with volcanic gas and falling meteorites that strike with the frequency of raindrops in a storm. Imagine hovering above this world. Not standing on it, there is nothing to stand on yet. The surface, where it exists at all, is a crust of dark basalt barely solidified above the magma beneath. You can see it glow in places, orange and red, the deep interior bleeding through cracks in the young stone. The sky above is not blue. It is the color of embers seen through smoke. The atmosphere is a thick mixture of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, water vapor, and traces of methane and ammonia, nothing your lungs could use, nothing your eyes would recognize as familiar. The clouds, where they form, are dense and dark and perpetual. The moon is far closer than it is now. In the Hadean Eon, the moon is perhaps 1/10 its current distance from the Earth, enormous in the sky, filling a far greater portion of the dark heavens than the small disk you know tonight. The gravitational pull of this close moon creates tides of unimaginable size, not in liquid water, there is not yet a stable ocean, but in the molten rock itself. The crust rises and falls with tidal rhythms. The interior churns. The planet is not a settled place. It is a system in the early and violent stages of finding its balance. Meteorites continue to fall. Not occasionally, not rarely, but constantly, a period called the Late Heavy Bombardment, when the inner solar system is still thick with leftover debris from its formation, and that debris falls toward the largest targets. Some of these impactors are enormous. Some are large enough to remelt the crust they strike, to vaporize any water that has condensed, to reset the surface of the young planet. And yet, even in this chaos, chemistry is happening. Complex chemistry. Carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen forming and reforming in the heat and pressure, practicing the combinations that will eventually, given enough time, produce something extraordinary. The oceans begin to appear, gradually, as the planet cools enough for water vapor in the atmosphere to condense and fall as rain. Rain on a hot world. The water hits the still warm surface and much of it evaporates immediately, rising again, falling again, a cycle of condensation and evaporation that slowly, over millions of years, begins to accumulate liquid water. The first oceans are not the deep blue oceans you might imagine. They are dark and hot, slightly acidic, heavy with dissolved minerals. They exist in brief patches between volcanic islands, surrounded by steam, under a sky that still glows faintly with the heat of ongoing impacts. But they are water. Liquid water on a planetary surface. And liquid water is, as far as we know, a necessary condition for life. You can rest now in the knowledge that this hostile world is not a world without future. It is a world in preparation. The heat is not destruction, it is transformation. The meteorite strikes are not endings, they are deliveries. Carbon arrives from space. Amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, have been found on meteorites that have fallen to Earth in historic times. The raw materials of life are being delivered to a world not yet ready to use them, but that will be ready, given time. Given enormous, geological time. The Hadean Eon lasts for approximately 500 million years. 500 million years of cooling, of meteor storms gradually easing as the solar system clears its own debris, of oceans growing larger and deeper and slightly less hot, of a crust gradually thickening and stabilizing. 500 million years is longer than the entire time from the first fish to the present day. Longer than all of the Paleozoic era. This period of apparent violence and chaos is, in terms of duration, one of the longest chapters in Earth's story. And it ends not with catastrophe but with stillness. The meteorites thin out. The crust thickens. The oceans deepen. The sky begins to clear, fractionally, incrementally, over millions of years. By 4 billion years ago, the world looks something like this. A vast dark ocean covering most of the planet. Small islands of granite, the first stable continental crust, emerging above the water like early experiments in land. A sky that is not yet blue, the absence of free oxygen means there is no ozone layer, and the sky would appear faintly orange or even purple to eyes that might exist to see it. The sun is smaller and dimmer, roughly 70% of its current brightness, but the thick atmosphere and its greenhouse gases compensate, keeping the surface liquid, keeping the ocean from freezing. The world is quiet. The constant percussion of impacts has nearly ceased. The volcanic activity continues but has settled into something more rhythmic, less apocalyptic. The planet is breathing now. Slowly. Deeply. Something is about to happen in this dark ocean. Something small. Something that will change everything. But not yet. For now, the ocean simply exists. The waves move across its surface in the dim orange light of a young sun, and beneath them, in the warm mineral-rich water near volcanic vents on the seafloor, the chemistry that has been practicing for millions of years is assembling itself into something new. Something that will not look like life. Something that will not behave like life in any way you would recognize. But something that will, given time, given hundreds of millions of years, become every living thing that has ever existed on the surface of this world. Including you. Let that thought settle gently, the way sediment settles in still water. You are made of this. The iron in your blood was forged in dying stars before your sun existed. The carbon in every cell of your body has been cycling through the Earth's systems for billions of years. You are not separate from the story of this planet. You are one of its most recent expressions. And tonight, traveling back through its history, you are not going somewhere foreign. You are going home, in the deepest possible sense of that word. The Hadean world fades. The ocean deepens. The temperature drops, slowly, over millions of years. And in the darkness below the waves, something new is beginning to stir. Not yet alive. Not yet moving. But assembling itself, with the unhurried patience of chemistry, into something the universe has never seen before. 3.8 billion years ago, in the warm mineral-rich water near a hydrothermal vent on the floor of the Archean Ocean, something becomes alive. There is no moment of drama. There is no flash of light, no sound, no visible change in the water around it. What happens is chemistry that crosses a threshold, that becomes self-replicating, that begins to maintain itself against the tendency of all things to dissolve and disperse. Life, in its first form, is simply chemistry that has learned to persist. You are floating in the Archean Ocean. It is warm here, near the vent. The water carries heat from deep within the planet, and along with that heat it carries minerals, iron, sulfur, manganese, silica. The water is slightly alkaline. The vent itself is a structure of pale mineral deposits, built up over centuries by the continuous flow of warm water from below, a chimney of white and yellow and ochre rising from the dark seafloor. Around it, in the warm plume of mineral-rich water, the first living things exist. You cannot see them. They are single cells, smaller than the eye can resolve, with no internal structure beyond the most basic chemistry. But they are there. And they are doing something that nothing on Earth has ever done before. They are eating. They are growing. And they are dividing, one cell becoming two, two becoming four, passing their chemical instructions into the next generation. The Archean world, seen from above, is a place of dark water and small islands and a sky unlike anything that exists today. The sun, rising over the ocean, is slightly dimmer than the sun you know. But the sky through which it rises is a different color entirely. Without free oxygen, without an ozone layer, the atmosphere scatters light differently, and the sky would appear to your eyes as a faint, milky orange at dawn, deepening to a kind of pale lavender at zenith, depending on the time of day and the density of haze. The clouds, where they exist, are white and ordinary. But the quality of light is alien. Everything is slightly golden, slightly dim, slightly warm in a way that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the spectrum of light reaching the surface through an atmosphere that is not yet breathable. For hundreds of millions of years, life consists entirely of these single cells. Bacteria. Archaea, an entirely different domain of life, chemically distinct from bacteria in fundamental ways. These organisms have no eyes, no nervous systems, no ability to move with intention. They respond to chemical gradients in their environment, drifting toward or away from particular chemicals, consuming what is available, dividing when conditions allow. They live in the dark water near hydrothermal vents. They live in the sunlit shallows. They live in hot springs and cold water and in the thin films of moisture on rock. They are everywhere, and nothing else is anywhere. For 1 billion years, perhaps 1.5 billion, this is the entire living world. Invisible, microscopic, infinitely varied in chemistry but uniform in scale, a world of cells without a single multicellular organism anywhere on Earth. Approximately 2.7 billion years ago, a particular group of bacteria develops an extraordinary capability. These are the cyanobacteria, and what they have learned to do will change the world more profoundly than any asteroid impact, any volcanic eruption, any ice age. They have learned to use sunlight. Not in the way that some earlier bacteria used chemical energy from vents. This is something different, something more powerful. These cyanobacteria are splitting water molecules using the energy of sunlight, extracting the hydrogen to build their cell chemistry, and releasing the other component of water as a waste product. That waste product is oxygen. Oxygen, to the organisms currently living on Earth, is poison. The chemistry of early life was built entirely around an oxygen-free environment. Oxygen is reactive, aggressive, destructive to the delicate molecular machinery of early cells. When cyanobacteria begin releasing oxygen into the ocean and eventually into the atmosphere, it is catastrophic for the anaerobic life that has dominated Earth for over 1 billion years. This is sometimes called the Great Oxidation Event, and it represents the first, but far from the last, time that one form of life would fundamentally alter the chemistry of the planet for all other forms of life. The world that cyanobacteria inherit is a world without oxygen. The world they leave behind is one that breathes it. You walk, in imagination only, since there is nothing to walk on yet above the water, to the shore of an Archean tidal flat. The smell of the air is strange. Slightly sulfurous. Slightly metallic. The absence of the green smell of plants is total. There are no plants, and won't be for another 2 billion years. But the tidal flat itself is not lifeless. Spread across the wet rock in broad, irregular sheets are the stromatolites, layered mats of cyanobacteria growing in shallow water, trapping and binding sediment, building slow structures of limestone that in some places rise to knee height before you. Some of them are rounded, like the tops of heads. Some are flat. Some are branching. They move imperceptibly, over decades and centuries, they grow, but on any given morning, standing here, they look like stone. These stromatolites are building the future. Grain by grain of captured sediment, bubble by bubble of oxygen rising from their photosynthesizing surfaces, they are constructing the world that every subsequent living thing will depend upon. The oxygen they produce will take hundreds of millions of years to reach its current atmospheric concentration. But the process has begun. You can almost imagine, standing here on this ancient shore, a very faint smell of something new in the air, something clean and sharp and not yet dominant, but there. The first molecules of free oxygen in an atmosphere that has never known it before. The first breath of the future. The Great Oxidation event occurs approximately 2.4 billion years ago. By this point, cyanobacteria have been pumping oxygen into the atmosphere for hundreds of millions of years, but the oxygen has been absorbed by dissolved iron in the ocean, rusting it. The banded iron formations that miners extract today, those ancient layers of red and gray in deep rock, are the rust of the Proterozoic ocean, the chemical record of billions of years of cyanobacterial photosynthesis. When the iron in the ocean is finally fully oxidized, when there is no more iron to absorb the oxygen, it begins to accumulate in the atmosphere. And the world changes. For most of the anaerobic life of the Archean, this is an ending. But for the aerobic organisms that evolve in response, organisms that not only tolerate oxygen but use it, that burn it with their food to release energy far more efficiently than any anaerobic process, this is a beginning. Aerobic respiration, the biochemical process happening in every cell of your body right now as you read these words, is one of the most significant evolutionary innovations in the history of life. It generates so much more energy per unit of food than anaerobic chemistry that it opens up possibilities that were previously impossible: larger cells, more complex behavior, eventually multicellularity itself. The Archean Ocean, seen from this point in the story, feels like a world in preparation. Not a failed world, not a primitive world, but a world laying down the foundations that everything else will build upon. The cyanobacteria in their shallow water mats are doing more than surviving, they are engineering. They are writing the chemical conditions for every animal, every plant, every fungus, every complex creature that will ever live on this planet. And they will go on doing it for the next 2 billion years, mostly unchanged, still present in their stromatolite communities on tidal flats today in a few places around the world, still photosynthesizing, still releasing oxygen, still as fundamental to the chemistry of the living world as they were when the sky was orange and the seas were rust red and nothing with eyes had yet existed to see any of it. Rest in that thought. The world is patient. Life is patient. Whatever is needed will be assembled, given enough time and enough chemistry and enough small, invisible organisms doing their work in the warm water. The story is long. It has barely begun. If you are drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. There is a period in Earth's history sometimes called the Boring Billion. Scientists mean this with affection rather than dismissal, a billion years, from roughly 1.8 billion to 800 million years ago, during which the Earth appears relatively stable, during which the oceans maintain a fairly consistent chemistry, during which life continues but does not obviously diversify. To a geologist examining rock from this period, things look quiet. To a biologist paying closer attention, something extraordinary is happening, but so slowly, on such a deep timescale, that the ordinary tools of geological observation almost miss it. What is happening, during the Boring Billion, is the invention of complexity. Inside single cells, the only kind of life that exists, the internal architecture is being reinvented. Early bacteria and archaea have no nucleus, no membrane-bound compartments, no elaborate internal structure. They are bags of chemistry. But approximately 2 billion years ago, something new appears, a cell with a nucleus, a membrane-bound compartment containing the genetic material, surrounded by a cytoplasm rich with specialized structures. These are eukaryotes, and your cells are eukaryotic cells. Every cell in your body has a nucleus. Every cell in your body is built on an architecture that was invented, by evolution, 2 billion years before you existed. You are resting now, and inside your body, billions of eukaryotic cells are doing their quiet work. They are reading the instructions in their nuclei. They are converting food and oxygen into energy. They are maintaining themselves, repairing themselves, communicating with neighboring cells. This process is ancient beyond your ability to feel. The machinery doing this work tonight, in your body, is fundamentally the same machinery that existed in the first eukaryotic cell, 2 billion years ago, in the warm water of the Proterozoic ocean. You are continuous with that. Your rest tonight is part of the same long story. How did the eukaryotic cell arise? The leading theory, the endosymbiotic theory, supported by decades of molecular evidence, holds that eukaryotic cells arose from a partnership. Somewhere in the Proterozoic ocean, one bacterial cell engulfed another, smaller bacterial cell. Rather than digesting it, the larger cell and the smaller cell established a relationship of mutual benefit. The smaller cell received shelter and resources. The larger cell received the energy-producing chemistry of the smaller cell. Over time, over generations, over millions of years of coevolution, the smaller cell became an organelle, a structure inside the larger cell, no longer capable of independent life, completely integrated into the host cell's biology. We call these organelles mitochondria. They are the powerhouses of your cells. They still carry their own small, circular DNA, a remnant of their ancestry as independent bacteria, a fossil of the merger that created the cell you inhabit. The Proterozoic world, seen from above, is a world of ocean. The continents are gathering, the supercontinent Rodinia is assembling itself across these hundreds of millions of years, a vast landmass surrounded by deep ocean, but the dominant feature of the planet is still water. The ocean is changing its chemistry, slowly, as cyanobacteria continue their patient photosynthesis. Oxygen levels in the atmosphere rise and fall across long cycles. The sky is approaching something like a modern blue in periods of higher oxygen, then fading back toward orange or gray as oxygen levels drop. The climate oscillates. And then, approximately 750 million years ago, the Earth does something astonishing. It freezes. Entirely. Or nearly entirely. The supercontinent Rodinia is breaking apart, and the volcanic activity associated with this breakup, combined with unusual atmospheric chemistry, triggers a runaway glaciation, ice sheets advancing from the poles, covering the equator, covering the ocean, until the entire surface of the planet is white. This is Snowball Earth, and it is one of the most extreme climate events the planet has ever experienced. Global average temperatures drop to perhaps -50 degrees Celsius. The ocean surface freezes to depths of a kilometer or more in places. The sky clears, because there is no liquid water to produce clouds, and the white surface of the frozen Earth reflects sunlight back into space, maintaining the cold in a self-reinforcing feedback loop. Somehow, life survives. Possibly in pockets of liquid water beneath the ice, kept warm by geothermal heat. Possibly in thin films of meltwater on the equatorial ice surface during brief periods when the sun warms the ice enough to produce small pools. The cyanobacteria, with their extraordinary resilience, endure. And eventually, after perhaps 10 million years of global ice, the rescue comes from within the Earth itself. Volcanoes, which never stopped erupting beneath the ice, have been pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere for millions of years. With no liquid water to absorb it, with no biological processes to consume it, the carbon dioxide accumulates. And finally, after millions of years, the greenhouse effect from accumulated volcanic carbon dioxide overwhelms the reflective cooling of the ice. The Earth thaws. Quickly. Violently. Within perhaps 1,000 years of the threshold being crossed, the ice melts, the oceans return, and the Earth transitions from the most extreme ice age in its history to perhaps the hottest conditions it has ever experienced, all in a geological instant. There are multiple Snowball Earth episodes, at least 2, possibly more, between 750 and 600 million years ago. Each time, the world freezes. Each time, it thaws. And each time it thaws, the conditions on the other side are different. The chemistry is different. The opportunities are different. And something about the Snowball Earth episodes, or about the extreme conditions of the thaws that followed them, seems to have accelerated the evolution of life in a fundamental way. Because what comes after the last great thaw, approximately 635 million years ago, is unlike anything that had existed before. What comes after is the first animals. Not the first life. Not the first cells. Not even the first eukaryotic cells. But the first creatures that are recognizably animals, multicellular organisms that have differentiated cell types, that have some form of body plan, that eat rather than simply absorb, that move or at least once moved. They are strange beyond imagination, these first animals. They are soft, and flat, and slow, and alien. But they are the beginning of your lineage. And they live in an ocean that, after billions of years of bacterial and single-celled life, is finally becoming a more complex place. The Proterozoic ends not with extinction but with emergence. With a world warming after its last freeze, with oxygen levels climbing toward values that can support larger, more complex organisms, with a seafloor that has been bare of complex life for so long that every ecological niche available to animals is empty and waiting to be filled. The stage is set. The players are assembling. And in the warm shallow seas of the late Proterozoic, what we now call the Ediacaran Period, the curtain is about to rise on the strangest biological theater the world has ever staged. The water is warm tonight. Imagine it that way. Warm and clear and very still, the color of shallow tropical sea, the bottom visible below you as pale sand and dark stromatolite domes. Something is moving, very slowly, near the bottom. Something has never moved before in this way. You are almost there. 635 million years ago, the last of the great global freezes has ended. The ocean is warming. The chemistry of the shallow seas is shifting, oxygen levels rising, the quality of the water changing in ways that open new possibilities for life. And in these warm, oxygenated shallows, something new is beginning to grow. Not cells. Not bacterial mats. Something larger. Something that takes the idea of the single cell and multiplies it, 10 cells, 100 cells, 1,000 cells working together as one organism, each cell performing a different function, each cell connected to the others in a cooperative arrangement that produces a body. You are floating above an Ediacaran seafloor, approximately 575 million years ago. The water is shallow, perhaps 10 meters deep, and warm, and extraordinarily clear. The sun filters down in shifting columns of pale gold light, illuminating a floor that is, at first glance, almost featureless. Sand. Fine pale sediment, undisturbed. No burrowing animals have ever existed, and so the seafloor is smooth and unbroken, a carpet of compressed sediment, here and there marked by the low domes of stromatolite mats. But look more carefully. Look at the slight irregularities in the sediment. Look at the flat, oval forms resting on the surface, the frond-like structures rising a few centimeters above the floor, the slow, barely visible movement of something that is not a current and not a wave but something deliberate, or at least something persistent. What you are looking at is the Ediacaran biota, and it is the strangest collection of organisms you will ever encounter. These creatures existed for approximately 90 million years, longer than dinosaurs would reign, and then vanished almost completely from the fossil record, replaced by the very different creatures of the Cambrian explosion. We know them from their fossils, perfect imprints in sandstone and silicate rock, preserved in exceptional detail in locations in Australia, Canada, Namibia, Russia, England, and elsewhere. But what they actually were, whether they were animals in any sense we would recognize, whether they belonged to the animal kingdom at all, or whether they represent an entirely separate experiment in multicellular life that was ultimately extinguished, remains one of biology's most fascinating and deeply contested questions. The creature called Dickinsonia is the first you notice, because it is the largest. It lies flat on the sediment below you, perfectly oval, its surface marked by a pattern of raised ribs emanating from a central line, like a leaf, or like a very flat, very symmetrical worm, or like nothing you have ever seen, because it is genuinely unlike anything alive today. Some Dickinsonia grew to 1.5 meters in diameter. The one below you is perhaps 30 centimeters, a disk of soft tissue resting on the seafloor, absorbing nutrients through its underside, growing by adding new units at one end while the older end remains constant. It does not have a mouth. It does not have a gut. It does not, as far as we can tell, have organs of any kind. It is body all the way through, soft, diffuse, organized into its remarkable rib pattern, doing whatever it does in the quiet of this ancient sea. Recent research has found traces of cholesterol in Dickinsonia fossils, a molecule produced by animals, not by algae or bacteria. This is significant. Cholesterol tells us that Dickinsonia was probably genuinely animal, genuinely one of us in the deepest taxonomic sense. But what kind of animal requires the imagination to stretch? There is no mouth. There is no stomach. There is no nervous system, no eyes, no limbs, no organs of circulation. By every visible criterion, Dickinsonia is as simple as an animal can be while still being an animal at all. It is as if evolution took the idea of an animal and reduced it to its absolute minimum, just to prove the concept could work. A few meters away, anchored to the sediment by a thin holdfast, a Charnia rises toward you, a frond-like structure, branching in a repeated pattern, like a feather or a fern or the fractal branching of a river delta, rising perhaps 20 centimeters above the seafloor into the warm water above. Charnia was one of the first Ediacaran organisms discovered, found in rocks in England that were once thought to predate all complex life. Its discovery in 1957 by a teenage schoolgirl named Tina Negus, who brought the impression of the frond to a geologist who initially dismissed it, is one of paleontology's more quietly remarkable stories. What Charnia was doing anchored to the seafloor, whether it was filter feeding, whether it was photosynthesizing with the help of symbiotic algae within its tissue, whether it was doing something we have no category for, is still uncertain. But it was beautiful, in its way. Patient and still and reaching upward toward the light in an ocean where nothing else yet rose from the floor toward the surface in quite this way. Now you see something move. Not dramatically, not swiftly, but unmistakably, a slight, deliberate shifting of position, a directional displacement across the sediment. This is Cambriella, and it may be the most significant Ediacaran organism of all. Cambriella was oval, perhaps 10 centimeters long, with a stiffened upper surface and a soft foot-like underside, and it moved, grazing across the sediment surface, leaving behind it distinctive fan-shaped scrape marks in the sediment where it appears to have been raking up microbial mat with some kind of feeding apparatus. Cambriella appears to have been moving with purpose. Appears to have had a front end and a back end, a direction of travel, a reason for going where it was going. In an organism of this antiquity, this is remarkable. Motion with direction. Feeding with intent. The first hint of something we would recognize as behavior. The Ediacaran seafloor, from above, looks like a quiet garden. The frond-like forms of Charnia and its relatives rise in clusters from the seafloor, oriented to face the current, passively gathering whatever nutrients drift by. Between them, the flat discs of Dickinsonia rest like fallen leaves on the smooth sediment. Cambriella moves slowly between them, unhurried, grazing. Here and there are other forms, Tribrachidium, with its three-armed symmetry that matches no animal body plan alive today. Sprigina, slightly more worm-like, possibly predatory, though if it ate anything in this world of filter feeders and mat grazers it is not obvious what. The world is gentle. The water is warm. Nothing is yet hunting anything with teeth or claws, because teeth and claws have not been invented. Violence, as a strategy, does not yet exist. This garden lasts for 90 million years. From approximately 635 to 541 million years ago, the Ediacaran world persists, slowly changing, slowly diversifying, exploring the possibilities of soft multicellular life without hard parts, without eyes, without nervous systems beyond the most basic. And then it ends. Not suddenly, but definitively. The creatures of the Ediacaran disappear from the fossil record at the end of their period, and what takes their place in the Cambrian is so different, so obviously more complex, so full of new innovations, that the transition looks in geological time like an almost instantaneous transformation. Some of the Ediacaran organisms were probably displaced by Cambrian animals. Others may have simply not survived the new conditions, the increasing oxygen, the arrival of predators, the disruption of the smooth sediment surface by burrowing animals that introduced chaos into a world that had previously been undisturbed. Possibly the Ediacarans represent a separate kingdom of life, a parallel experiment in multicellularity that ran for 90 million years and then was extinguished by competition or environmental change, a kingdom with no living descendants whatsoever. This is a melancholy thought, and a beautiful one. A whole way of being alive, a whole category of existence, gone completely, not a single member of the Ediacaran kingdoms walking the earth today, existing only in the impressions left in ancient rock by creatures that needed no hard parts to leave the faintest trace of themselves behind. The Ediacaran water is cooling now, gradually, in your imagination. The forms below you, the flat Dickinsonia, the reaching Charnia, the slowly moving Cambriella, are growing still and quiet in the dimming water. The story that comes next will be louder, stranger, more obviously alive in ways the eye can quickly recognize. But this world is worth sitting with for a moment longer. This quiet garden before gardens. This patient, soft, mysterious world where life first learned to build a body and hold it together and move, however slowly, through the water. It will not last. Nothing lasts. But it was real. It was alive. And it reached toward the light. 541 million years ago, the Cambrian period begins, and the world transforms. Not overnight, this is geology, and even the most rapid events take tens of thousands of years at minimum, but in terms of the geological record, in terms of the fossils preserved in rock, the change is dramatic and sudden. Before the Cambrian, complex animals are soft and rare and strange. After, almost immediately after, in geological time, the world is full of creatures with shells and spines and claws and eyes and jaws. Full of predators and prey and the infinite evolutionary conversation between them. Full of body plans so diverse, so experimental, so wildly varied, that the Cambrian seafloor looks less like a natural community and more like evolution testing every design it has ever imagined, all at once, to see which ones work. You are drifting now above a Cambrian reef, approximately 515 million years ago. The location is what will eventually become the Canadian Rockies, in British Columbia, but right now it is a warm shallow sea at the margins of the ancient continent Laurentia, close to the equator, the water above you full of life that your eye can actually follow, actually track, actually recognize as animal movement. The seafloor below is not the smooth Ediacaran sediment of 100 million years ago. It is disturbed, burrowed, disrupted, the tracks and burrows of countless creatures visible in the sediment, the surface complex and irregular in a way that speaks of constant activity. Things are living here that move through the substrate, that dig, that filter, that hunt. The largest creature you see is Anomalocaris, and it demands attention. This is the apex predator of the Cambrian world, and in this ocean it is enormous, or enormous by Cambrian standards, which means perhaps half a meter to a meter in length, which in a world where almost everything else is smaller than your thumb makes it something very much like a giant. It swims above you now, using the undulating lobes along its sides to propel itself through the water with surprising grace. Its two large grasping appendages curve forward from its head, each one jointed, flexible, capable of closing with precision around its prey. Its mouth is circular and complex, a ring of plates that can compress to deliver a bite unlike anything the Ediacaran world ever imagined. And its eyes are extraordinary, large compound eyes, like those of a modern dragonfly but more complex, capable of seeing in directions simultaneously, capable of detecting the slightest movement in the water around it. Anomalocaris is not terrifying. It is beautiful. It moves through the Cambrian water with the unhurried confidence of a creature that has no natural predators, that has never been hunted, that is the largest and best-equipped animal in its world. Its grasping appendages, when not in use, fold slightly, and the creature's expression, if it can be said to have one, is one of calm, patient attention. It is looking for trilobites. The trilobites sense it coming, and the nearest ones roll into tight balls, a defensive response that their descendants will still be performing 270 million years later. Anomalocaris examines one rolled-up trilobite with the tips of its appendages, tests it, and decides the effort is not worth the return. It moves on, drifting above you on its undulating fins, the sunlight from above catching the iridescence of its exoskeleton in shifting blues and greens. The trilobites below you are extraordinary in their variety. This is their great age. The Cambrian and the Ordovician will be the high point of trilobite diversity, with thousands of species explored across every conceivable ecological niche. The ones closest to you are Olanellus, early, simple trilobites with large head shields and long sweeping spines, plowing through the sediment, filtering organic material. Further off, a group of paradoxides, larger and more elongate, with eyes mounted on stalks above their heads, moves across an open stretch of seafloor. Trilobites will exist for 270 million years, longer than dinosaurs, and in this, their earliest chapter, they are already ancient-seeming, already fully formed, already the most common complex animals in the sea. Now your attention is drawn to something stranger. On a low mound of sponge and early reef, something moves that does not fit any pattern you have yet encountered. It is hallucigenia, and when it was first described from Burgess shale fossils in the 1970s, scientists were so confused by its anatomy that they reconstructed it upside down and backwards. What they took for legs were actually dorsal spines, and what they took for tentacles were actually legs, and the end they assumed was the head was actually the tail, and vice versa. Even when correctly oriented, hallucigenia is deeply strange. 7 pairs of stilt-like legs, each pair paired with a spine that curves upward from the back above it. A small head with simple eyes and a circular mouth. A body so unusual, so unlike any animal alive today, that placing it on the tree of life requires careful molecular and comparative analysis, and the conclusion, that it belongs to a group related to modern velvet worms, feels almost inadequate to the strangeness of its form. Consider Opabinia, and let the strangeness of it wash over you without any need to fully understand it. 5 eyes, arranged along the top of its head, each one on a short stalk, giving it a field of view that encompassed almost the entire sphere around its body. A long, flexible, tubular proboscis extending from the front of its head, ending in a small grasping claw, used, presumably, to reach under the sediment for buried prey and lift it to the mouth, which was positioned further back, underneath the head. A soft, segmented body with overlapping lateral lobes for swimming and a fan tail. When a reconstruction of Opabinia was first presented to a major paleontology conference in 1975, the assembled scientists laughed, not in dismissal, but in the delight of genuine astonishment. No one had ever seen anything like it. No one had imagined anything like it. And yet here it was, 5-eyed, long snout, absolutely real, swimming through Cambrian seas 500 million years ago. Now find, in your mind's eye, a different creature entirely. A small one, easy to overlook. Barely 5 centimeters long, ribbon-shaped, translucent in the Cambrian water, swimming with a gentle S-shaped motion through the water column just above the reef. This is Pichia gracilens, and of all the creatures in this extraordinary Cambrian sea, this is the one with the most direct relevance to you personally. Picaia has a notochord, a stiffening rod of cartilage running along its back, a precursor to the vertebral column. It belongs to a group called chordates, and every chordate that ever lived, every fish, every amphibian, every reptile, every bird, every mammal, every human, can trace its lineage back to something like Picaia, or to the common ancestor it represents. You are looking at your ancestor. Not a symbolic ancestor, not a metaphorical ancestor, but an actual biological ancestor, something that, if you could trace the line of descent forward in time from its lineage, would lead eventually, through hundreds of millions of years of transformation, to the fish that crawled onto land, to the reptile that gave rise to mammals, to the first primate, to the first human, to you, lying here in the dark, listening to this story. Picaia gracilans swims through Cambrian water, 515 million years old, utterly unaware of what it will become. It is looking for food. It will reproduce and die and be replaced by slightly different versions of itself, generation after generation, for millions of years, slowly accumulating the changes that will eventually produce a notochord reinforced by bone, a brain protected by a skull, fins that will become limbs, and on through the long slow miracle of evolution to the body you inhabit tonight. The Cambrian explosion lasted approximately 20 to 25 million years, a blink in geological time, an eternity in human experience. In that time, almost every major animal body plan that exists today was established. Not every specific lineage, but every fundamental architecture, bilateral symmetry, radial symmetry, the basic forms of head and tail and limb and gut and sense organ. Evolution was not so much inventing new ideas in the Cambrian as trying all of its ideas at once, in an ocean full of empty niches and no established competition, and discovering which ones were viable by the simple test of survival. The sun is setting, very slowly, over the Cambrian Sea. The light changes from gold to orange to the deep blue of evening, and the creatures of the reef settle into whatever their version of night looks like, Anomalocaris drifting into deeper water, the trilobites rolling slightly tighter, the sea floor quieting. The water is warm. The current is gentle. And you are floating above all of it, watching 500 million years of evolution begin to find its shape, already knowing, though the creatures below do not, that all of this is the beginning of a very long story that will eventually lead here, to this moment, to this voice, to this quiet dark. 485 million years ago, the Cambrian has ended and the Ordovician has begun, and the world is, in the most precise sense of the word, flourishing. The seas are warm. The shallow continental shelves, the submerged edges of Laurentia and Gondwana and Baltica and the other land masses that are, in this deep time, positioned very differently than the continents you know, are teeming with life of extraordinary variety. The great experiment of the Cambrian has settled now into something more stable, more organized, more ecologically complex. Predators and prey have established their dialogues. Filter feeders have colonized every available substrate. Reefs have begun to grow, not coral reefs as you know them, but their Ordovician equivalents, built by entirely different organisms but serving the same ecological function as complex three-dimensional habitats supporting enormous biological diversity. You are drifting above an Ordovician reef, perhaps 460 million years ago. The water above you is warm and clear and saturated with life, plankton too small to see individually coloring the water a faint greenish tint, larger creatures moving through it at various depths. The reef itself is built primarily by bryozoans, colonial animals that build intricate lattice structures of calcium carbonate, and by stromatoporoids, another colonial animal that produced massive dome-like and sheet-like structures of layered calcium. Between and above these builders grow crinoids, animals related to sea urchins and starfish, with long feathery arms extended into the current to catch food particles, each one mounted on a slender stalk anchored to the reef surface. From a distance, a crinoid colony looks like an underwater meadow of flowers. Up close, each crinoid is its own complex organism, its arms moving slowly in the current, its central disc processing whatever the current delivers. Moving through this reef garden, something large catches your attention. Long, slender, straight-shelled, moving by jet propulsion through the water with a sinuous, elegant motion, this is an orthoconic nautiloid, a cephalopod mollusk related to the modern nautilus and to squid and octopuses, but unlike any of them in form. Some of the largest Ordovician nautiloids reached 6 meters or more in length, enormous by the standards of their world, their straight conical shells tapering to a point at the back and opening to a large aperture at the front from which the animal's soft body extended, its ring of tentacles trailing in the water. They are the apex predators of the Ordovician ocean, filling the ecological role that Anomalocaris had occupied in the Cambrian, but larger, more powerful, more complex in their hunting behavior. The nautiloid above you tilts its shell slightly and jets forward in a burst of propulsion, its tentacles closing around a smaller cephalopod. The smaller animal struggles briefly, then is still. The nautiloid withdraws slightly into the shadow of the reef overhang, processing its meal with quiet efficiency. There is predation now, and there has been since the Cambrian, but in the Ordovician it has become a sophisticated ecological structure, a hierarchy of hunters and hunted, of strategies and counter-strategies, of bodies evolved in response to bodies that are trying to eat them. The trilobites of the Ordovician reef bear prominent spines. Their eyes have become larger and more complex. They roll into defensive balls with greater precision and speed. Evolution is a conversation between the eaten and the eater, and in the Ordovician, that conversation has been going on long enough to produce extraordinary results. The trilobites themselves deserve your attention. In the Ordovician, they reach the peak of their diversity, perhaps 10,000 species across every conceivable body plan. Some have eyes like towers, stalked above their heads, giving them vision in almost every direction simultaneously. Some are almost entirely smooth, hydrodynamic, active swimmers. Some are so heavily spined that they look like abstract art, Selenopeltis and its relatives armed with long lateral spines extending further to the side than their bodies are wide. Some are tiny, barely a millimeter long. Some are enormous, reaching 60 or 70 centimeters in length. They fill every role in the ecosystem that their body plan allows: predator, scavenger, filter feeder, particle feeder, even, possibly, planktonic drifter. And swimming through the water above you, small and unprepossessing, armored with flat bony plates on their heads and upper bodies but soft and unprotected elsewhere, are the first vertebrates. Jawless fish, agnathons, related to modern lampreys and hagfish, are not yet the dominant creatures of the Ordovician Sea. They are new, experimental, still working out the details of what it means to have a backbone and a skull and a centralized nervous system. They graze on the seafloor, filtering organic material from the sediment, their flat bony shields pressed against the substrate as they move. They are not powerful. They are not fast. They have no jaws, no paired fins, no ability to maneuver with precision. But they have something the rest of the Ordovician sea lacks: a vertebral column, a cranium, the infrastructure of a nervous system that is more centralized and capable than anything that came before. They are small and humble and easy to overlook in this reef community full of spectacular nautiloids and armored trilobites. But they are your ancestors, these small armored fish, and their time is coming. Then the world changes. Approximately 443 million years ago, the Ordovician mass extinction begins, the second largest extinction event in Earth's history by some measures, eliminating approximately 85% of marine species. The cause is glaciation. The supercontinent Gondwana has drifted over the South Pole, and massive ice sheets are forming across its surface, locking up enormous quantities of water and ice, causing sea levels to drop dramatically as the ice grows. The warm shallow seas that have supported the extraordinary diversity of the Ordovician reef system drain away. The reef organisms, adapted to shallow warm water, cannot follow the retreating sea to deeper, colder environments. They die. The nautiloids survive, because they are mobile and can follow the sea. The trilobites are dramatically reduced, many of the most spectacularly ornamented groups vanishing entirely. The agnathan fish survive, small and adaptable. And then the ice retreats, the sea returns, and life begins the long slow process of recovery. The Silurian period, from 443 to 419 million years ago, is a world in recovery. And recovery, in the Silurian, brings new things. The ocean refills. New reef systems develop, built now by different organisms, tabulate and rugose corals among them, the ancestors of the coral reefs of the modern world. Jawed fish appear for the first time in the Silurian. The arrival of jaws is one of the most significant evolutionary events in vertebrate history, because jaws transform what a vertebrate can do, what it can eat, how it can hunt. The first jawed fish are small and cautious, but the principle is established. Prey can now be actively pursued and bitten. The world of vertebrate ecology has changed forever. On land, and this is new, this is the Silurian bringing something the Ordovician barely imagined, plants are beginning to grow. Not flowering plants, not ferns as you know them, not trees. But the first vascular plants, the first organisms with the internal plumbing to move water and nutrients from roots to photosynthesizing surfaces, are establishing themselves on wet rocks near the water's edge. They are tiny, just a few centimeters tall, without leaves or flowers or seeds, just simple upright stems, some with spore-bearing structures at their tips. But they are there. And they are beginning the slow transformation of the continents from bare rock to the living green world that all subsequent land life will depend upon. The first land animals appear in the Silurian as well, or more precisely, the first arthropods capable of breathing air and tolerating dry conditions. Early scorpions. Millipede-like creatures. Small, cautious, clinging to the moist edges of the land, venturing onto the damp rock near the water's edge but not yet moving far from it. They need moisture. They need the proximity of the sea. But they are there, the first animals permanently resident on land, the first animals breathing air as a matter of routine, the first animals to hear the wind rather than the current. The Silurian world, at dusk, is a place of calm water and quiet recovery. The reef has returned, simpler than the Ordovician reef but alive and growing. The new-jawed fish move through the deeper water, testing their jaws on smaller creatures. On the shore, the first plants stand in their minuscule columns, and the first land creatures move between them with the careful deliberation of organisms that have not entirely committed to the element they occupy. The sea is behind them. The land is in front. And something, some pull, some evolutionary pressure, some combination of opportunity and necessity, is drawing life forward. 419 million years ago, the Devonian period begins, and the sea is full of fish. Not the careful, jawless, bottom-grazing fish of the Ordovician. Not the first tentative jawed fish of the Silurian. Full, mature, diverse, astonishingly varied fish, fish with jaws and fins and scales and the beginnings of the internal architecture that will eventually produce every vertebrate on land. The Devonian is sometimes called the Age of Fishes, and the name is deserved. In these seas and rivers and lakes, the vertebrates are doing what they did not do in earlier periods, they are taking over. They are becoming the dominant large animals of their world, filling niches that were previously held by the cephalopods and arthropods, becoming predators of a new and more efficient kind. You are standing, actually standing, because the world has changed enough to make that possible, at least in some wet, coastal environments, on the bank of a Devonian river, approximately 380 million years ago. The water moves past you with the familiar sound of a river, a sound that would not be out of place in any landscape you know. But the landscape around you is unlike any you have ever seen. There are plants here, not the tiny, centimeter-high plants of the Silurian, but actual plants of some height, reaching your waist, reaching your shoulder, a few reaching above your head, the early experiments in what will become a forest. Their structure is unlike any modern plant. They have no broad leaves. Their stems branch and rebranch in repeating patterns, sometimes ending in spore-bearing knobs. The ground beneath them is soft with a carpet of smaller plants, liverworts and mosses and the low-growing relatives of the larger upright forms. The air smells of green and wet earth and something slightly unfamiliar, a chemical smell that comes from all this new vegetation releasing compounds into the air that no atmosphere has ever contained before in such quantity. There are insects here, in the Devonian. Small ones, no giant carboniferous dragonflies yet, the high-oxygen world that produces them is still tens of millions of years away. But mites and springtails and early wingless insects are moving through the vegetation, feeding on spores and on each other and on the decaying plant material that is beginning to accumulate on the ground, the first soil, the first real organic soil, produced by the interaction of plant roots and fungal networks and the small creatures moving through the debris. The earth is learning to make soil. Before the Devonian, the land surface was bare rock and thin mineral sediment. After the Devonian, it is something far more complex, a living medium, dark and rich and full of biological activity, capable of supporting larger and larger plants. In the river before you, something surfaces. A long, flattened head, covered in heavy bony plates, breaks the water briefly and submerges again. This is Dunkleistus, or a relative of it, one of the great placoderm fish of the Devonian, armored fish, their heads and upper bodies encased in interlocking plates of bone, the most formidable predators their world has yet produced. The fully grown Dunkleistus reached perhaps 9 meters in length, though individuals of that size were exceptional. The one in the river before you is younger, perhaps 3 meters, but already imposing, its jaws not equipped with teeth but with self-sharpening blades of bone that function like scissors, capable of closing with enough force to shear through other armored fish as if they were made of paper. Dunkleosteus does not seem to notice you. It is hunting, circling slowly in the deeper water of the river's central channel, its lateral line detecting pressure waves from smaller fish ahead. Then it accelerates, the plates of its head shield angling slightly as it opens its jaws, and the mechanics of this jaw opening are extraordinary even in the description. The lower jaw drops and the head simultaneously lifts, increasing the gape while also creating a powerful suction that draws water and prey into the mouth. The strike takes less than a second. The smaller fish is gone. Dunkleosteus circles again, settling back into its patient patrol of the river channel, the water around it undisturbed. Now follow the river toward the coast. The estuary here, where fresh water meets salt, is a particularly productive environment in the Devonian, a place where a variety of fish move between the two worlds, taking advantage of the different resources each offers. Among them, partially visible in the murky shallows near the bank, is something that does not look entirely like a fish. It has fins, 4 of them, lobed fins, each one supported internally by bones arranged in a pattern that will be immediately recognizable to any student of vertebrate anatomy, 1 bone connecting to the body, 2 bones connecting to that, then a cluster of smaller bones, then digits. The pattern of your arm is in this fin. The pattern of every tetrapod limb is in this fin. This is Tiktaalik rosei, discovered in the Canadian Arctic in 2004 and described as a missing link, though the term undersells it. Tiktaalik is a transitional form of extraordinary completeness, documenting the moment of transformation between fish and land vertebrate with a precision that paleontologists had hoped for but hardly dared expect. It has gills and lungs both. It has scales and fin rays, but also a neck, the first vertebrate neck, allowing the head to turn independently of the body, a capability essential for life on land. Its lobe fins can support its weight and push against the ground in a motion something like a push-up. It could raise itself from the water, hold its head above the surface, look around at the world above the waterline with eyes positioned on top of its head rather than on the sides. Imagine standing beside an estuary bank in the late Devonian and watching Tiktaalik haul itself partially onto the mudflat. Hold that position for a moment, its fins flexed against the soft mud, its head raised, its eyes scanning the unfamiliar environment above the water's surface. The air around it is warm and humid and smells of vegetation and mud and the slight sulfurous edge of the shallow estuary water. Insects move through the air above it. Small arthropods work through the mud beside it. The world above the water is not empty. It is populated, in its small way, with food and with possibility. Tiktaalik stays for a moment, then slides back into the water. But the moment is significant. A vertebrate has seen the land. A vertebrate has felt the land. The long colonization of the terrestrial world has, in this small muddy estuary, begun. The late Devonian forests are becoming something genuinely impressive. Archaeopteris, one of the first true trees, appears approximately 375 million years ago and quickly becomes a dominant feature of Devonian landscapes. It reaches 30 meters in height, with a woody trunk and spreading branches bearing fern-like fronds. Archaeopteris forests cover lowland areas near rivers and coasts across La Russia and Gondwana, producing the first forest shadows, the first forest floors, the first deep deposits of leaf litter and decaying wood. They change the atmosphere, pulling carbon dioxide out of the air through photosynthesis on an unprecedented scale, contributing to a long-term cooling of the Devonian climate. They change the rivers. Their roots stabilize soils and increase the flow of nutrients into waterways. They change the world, these first tall trees, simply by being tall, simply by existing in sufficient numbers to alter the chemistry of the air. Then the Devonian ends, approximately 359 million years ago, in one of the most severe extinction events in Earth's history. Approximately 75% of all species disappear. The warm reef systems of the Devonian, the great complex communities built over millions of years, collapse almost completely. The great placoderms, Dunkleistus and all its relatives, vanish from the fossil record. Many of the spectacular armored fish groups that define the Devonian are gone. The causes are debated: cooling climate, changes in ocean oxygen levels, possibly volcanic activity, but the result is clear. The age of fishes ends not in triumph but in catastrophe. The reefs are gone. The placoderms are gone. The Devonian world is over. But the lobe-finned fish survive. The creatures that have been learning to breathe air, to support themselves on their fins, to tolerate the shallow, oxygen-poor water that increasingly characterizes late Devonian rivers and estuaries, these survive. They will inherit the Carboniferous world and, with the new tool of a body that can function on land, begin to transform themselves into something the world has not yet seen, a vertebrate on land, breathing air, moving on limbs, looking up at a sky with eyes evolved to see through water. The story of terrestrial vertebrates, of every amphibian, every reptile, every bird, every mammal, every human, begins in the oxygen-poor estuaries of the late Devonian, with creatures that chose the mud over the deep water and found, to their descendants' enormous benefit, that the choice was sound. 359 million years ago, the Carboniferous period begins, and the world is wet and warm and green in a way it has never been before. The survivors of the Devonian extinction have been given an empty world to fill, and they fill it with extraordinary exuberance. The land, which in the Devonian was just beginning to acquire its forests, has in the early Carboniferous become something dense and complex and dark. You are entering the coal forest, not coal yet, not for hundreds of millions of years, but the living equivalent of what will eventually become the coal beds that powered the Industrial Revolution. The energy of the Carboniferous sun, captured by these trees, will be buried, compressed, and preserved until humans find it deep in the ground and burn it, releasing that ancient sunlight as heat and light and the exhaust of modern civilization. You are standing in a Carboniferous swamp forest, approximately 310 million years ago. The air is warm, equatorial warm, because this landscape sits near the ancient equator, in the part of the supercontinent Pangaea that is assembling itself across these millions of years. The humidity is total. You are drenched within moments simply from the moisture in the air. The ground beneath your feet is waterlogged, black water visible between the roots of the enormous trees around you, the surface covered in floating green mats of algae and decomposing plant material. The smell is extraordinary. Green and wet and organic and slightly sweet, like all the compost in the world concentrated in one place, because in a sense, this is exactly what this is. Look up. The trees that surround you are lepidodendron, the scale trees, and they are nothing like any tree you know. Their trunks rise straight and smooth from the water, enormous columns of plant tissue, 30, 40, 50 meters tall, their surface marked by the distinctive diamond-shaped patterns left by fallen leaves. These patterns give them their name. Lepido means scaled. But they are not trees in the modern sense. They have no wood, not in the modern botanical meaning of the word. Their trunks are composed of a soft, green, photosynthesizing tissue surrounded by a thick layer of bark-like material. The actual structural strength comes from the outer layers. The inner core is relatively soft. When these trees fell, they fell in a specific way. They did not decay in the normal sense, because the fungi and bacteria capable of breaking down their particular chemistry had not yet fully evolved to do so. They simply compressed, over millennia, into the dark layers of peat that would eventually become coal. The crowns of the lepidodendron are far above you, too high to see clearly in the forest shade, each trunk only branching at the very top, where the crown spreads in a tuft of long, grass-like leaves and produces, in season, enormous cones of spores. Between the great lepidodendron trunks, slightly shorter, are the sigillaria, similar in form but with a slightly different bark pattern, striated rather than diamond-scaled. And around your ankles, reaching your waist, reaching your shoulder in the drier areas near the forest edge, are the giant horsetails, calamites, reaching 30 meters in the wettest areas, their jointed stems and whorled branches the enormous ancestors of the tiny horsetails that still grow in damp places today. The ground between all of these is covered in ferns, enormous ferns, tree ferns in places, their fronds unfurling above a forest floor that receives almost no direct sunlight. The light in this forest is dim and green and shifting. Where shafts of sunlight penetrate the high canopy, they come down as columns of gold through the humid air, illuminating motes of pollen and spores drifting in the stillness. The sound of the forest is different from any modern forest. There are insects, the Carboniferous is the age of insects, and they are audible all around you, but their sounds are unfamiliar. There are no crickets yet. No cicadas. No birdsong, because there are no birds. What you hear is a complex layer of buzzing and clicking and the soft rustle of movement through the fern fronds, and underneath it all, the constant drip of condensed moisture falling from the high canopy to the water below. Now something very large crosses the open water a short distance from you, and you stop. Moving through the shallows with the steady, many-legged patience of an animal that has been doing exactly this for its entire existence is Arthropleura, a millipede relative reaching 2.5 meters in length, the largest terrestrial invertebrate that has ever lived on this planet. Its body is a chain of interlocking segments, each segment bearing 2 pairs of legs, the legs moving in that characteristic millipede ripple that is somehow both unsettling and hypnotic. It is broad, 1/3 of a meter across, and it moves with considerable deliberation, its antennae testing the air and the substrate ahead of it, its body curling slightly as it navigates a fallen log. Arthropleura is not a predator. It feeds on the decaying plant material that carpets the forest floor, processing the enormous quantities of organic debris that this forest produces in quantities the Devonian world never approached. It is harmless in the sense that it does not hunt, does not bite, does not sting. But it is large in a way that asks for some recalibration of your expectations about what invertebrates are capable of. In the Carboniferous atmosphere, richer in oxygen than any atmosphere since, with free oxygen concentrations perhaps 35% of the air compared to today's 21, invertebrate respiratory systems that normally limit body size through their reliance on passive diffusion are liberated from that constraint. Bigger insects can get enough oxygen. Bigger millipedes can get enough oxygen. The world has been dialed to a different setting, and the setting produces giants. Look up now, and look carefully at the air between the lepidodendron crowns. Something is crossing the gap between two trunks, something large enough to see clearly at this distance, something moving with the direct, purposeful flight of a predator. This is Meganeura, the giant dragonfly of the Carboniferous, and its wingspan is 70 centimeters, wider than the span of your outstretched arms is long. It is not a true dragonfly in the modern taxonomic sense, but a member of the order Meganosoptera, the griffin flies, and it is essentially a very large version of the dragonfly boplan, two pairs of rigid wings, enormous compound eyes, a thorax built for flight, an abdomen trailing behind. It moves through the air with the fluid precision of a modern dragonfly, changing direction in an instant, hovering briefly above a patch of ferns, then launching forward again in pursuit of something too small for you to see. The prey is another insect, smaller, but not small by modern standards, a large cockroach-like creature that attempts to drop into the fern fronds below. Meganeura adjusts its flight path with a speed that seems impossible for something of its size and catches the prey in its legs before it reaches the ferns. The whole encounter takes less than 2 seconds. Meganeura settles on the trunk of a lepidodendron, begins consuming its prey with the methodical efficiency of an apex arthropod predator, its wings folding and opening slowly in what looks almost like satisfaction. The dragonfly at rest is extraordinary to observe, the individual facets of its enormous compound eyes clearly visible, each one reflecting a tiny version of the forest around it, the dragon scales of its abdomen glistening with iridescent color in the filtered forest light. In the undergrowth near your feet, moving with the cautious deliberation of an animal that knows itself to be small and vulnerable in a world of giants, is Hylonomus. Small, perhaps 20 centimeters long, lizard-like in its general proportions, with a quick darting movement when it moves at all and a complete stillness when it pauses. Hylonomus is one of the earliest known amniotes, animals whose eggs are protected by membranes that prevent them from drying out, allowing reproduction on land without the need to return to water. This small creature sheltering beneath the lepidodendron roots has crossed a threshold that all the insects and millipedes and dragonflies around it crossed long ago, but that vertebrates are only now crossing, the threshold of complete independence from water. Hylonomus can lay its eggs in the forest floor, in dry leaf litter, without risk of the embryo desiccating. Its descendants will never need to return to water to breed. The night comes slowly in the Carboniferous forest, you can tell it is coming not by any change in the sky, which you cannot see through the canopy, but by a gradual deepening of the green dimness around you, a settling of the insect sounds into different registers, a cooling of the air from hot to merely warm. The Meganeura settle onto tree trunks, their wings still. The Arthropleura continues its patient movement through the undergrowth, because for a creature of its slow deliberate pace, day and night make little practical difference. The dark water between the roots reflects the faint glow of the sky above, orange, tonight, from cloud cover catching the last light, and something small and quick darts across that reflection, too fast to identify, before the water settles back to mirror stillness. This forest will burn, eventually. Not in catastrophe, but slowly, compressed by geological time into the coal seams that run through the rock of England and Pennsylvania and Poland and 100 other places where the Carboniferous world was eventually buried. Every bit of carbon in those seams was once atmospheric carbon dioxide, captured by these trees, held in their wood and peat, sealed away for 300 million years. The Industrial Revolution ran on Carboniferous photosynthesis. Your electricity, if it comes from coal, is Carboniferous sunlight. The world you live in is, in a quiet and fundamental sense, built on the coal forest. And the coal forest is simply this: warm dark water and enormous trees and giant dragonflies and the first small reptile-like creatures moving cautiously through the undergrowth, inventing the future with every generation. If you are drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. 299 million years ago, the Permian period begins, and the world is transforming in ways that no single creature can perceive, but that the rock record will preserve in extraordinary detail for the scientists of the far future to read. Pangaea, the supercontinent, is assembling itself, the land masses of the world pressing together in slow geological collision, raising mountain ranges where they meet, creating in the vast interior of the single continent an environment unlike anything that has existed before, a continental interior so large that its center is impossibly far from any ocean, a climate of extreme temperatures, dry beyond anything the coal forests knew, hot in the summers and cold in the winters, and without the moderating influence of the sea that had shaped every previous ecosystem. You are standing in the Permian interior, approximately 270 million years ago. The landscape around you is not the coal forest's wet gloom. It is red and open, red rock, red soil, the iron and the exposed stone oxidized by the Permian air to that distinctive rusty color. Low vegetation covers the ground in places, seed ferns, early conifers, their needle-like leaves adapted to the drier conditions that prevail here, far from the Permian coastline. The sky above is intensely blue, clear, and very large, the way skies feel in open landscape, in the absence of trees to frame and limit the view. The sun is bright and the air is dry and the temperature at noon is very high. But it is not noon now. It is early morning, and the air still holds the night's cold, and the red rocks are just beginning to warm in the low sunlight. On a flat rock in the growing warmth of the morning sun, something is warming itself. It is large, perhaps 3 meters long from the tip of its heavy head to the end of its substantial tail, and its most striking feature is the structure rising from its back, a sail, a fan of skin stretched between elongated neural spines extending from the vertebrae, each spine perhaps 1.5 meters tall at the sail's highest point, the whole structure curving slightly and catching the morning light. This is Dimetrodon, and it is important to know, before anything else, that Dimetrodon is not a dinosaur. It will almost certainly appear in dinosaur toy sets and museum displays alongside Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops, but Dimetrodon lived 40 million years before the first dinosaur, and it was more closely related to you, to mammals, to the listener, than it was to any reptile. It belongs to a group called synapsids, the mammaline animals, and in the Permian it is the apex predator of many land ecosystems across what is now North America and Europe. The sail of Dimetrodon is warming in the morning sun. As the temperature of the skin between those spines rises, blood flowing through the sail's capillary network is warmed and carried back to the body's core. This may be the function of the sail, thermoregulation, allowing Dimetrodon to warm up faster in the morning than its prey and competitors, to be active sooner, to have an advantage in the cool of the early morning that makes up for whatever disadvantage the sail's size and weight might impose in other circumstances. Whether this is actually the sail's function remains a matter of scientific debate. It may have been primarily for species recognition or sexual display, but the image of it warming in the morning sun is compelling either way. The sail becomes almost translucent in the right light, the blood vessels visible as darker lines within it, the whole structure glowing amber and orange as the sun rises behind it. Dimetrodon finishes warming and rises from the rock with a deliberate, somewhat sprawling gait, its legs positioned at the sides of its body rather than directly beneath it, in the sprawling posture of early synapsids and modern lizards, though its gait is more efficient than the fully sprawling crawl of truly primitive vertebrates. It moves toward the dry streambed below the rock, its heavy head lowered, its jaw slightly open to reveal differentiated teeth, not the simple conical teeth of fish or early reptiles, but teeth of different sizes and shapes in different parts of the jaw, a foreshadowing of the mammalian tooth variety that its distant descendants will develop. It finds the streambed, drinks briefly from a small pool, then lifts its head and surveys the landscape with the calm attentiveness of an animal that is, in its world, at the top of the food chain. Down the slope, in a patch of seed fern vegetation, a group of Moschops moves with the slow deliberation of large herbivores. Moschops was a dinocephalian, a large-bodied, barrel-chested synapsid herbivore, and its proportions are peculiar to modern eyes, an enormous, heavily built body supported on thick legs, a head that is disproportionately small for its bulk, the skull thickened dramatically above the eyes in a dome of solid bone that may have been used in head-butting contests between rivals. Moschops was large, up to 5 meters long in the biggest individuals, and its presence in the Permian landscape is imposing, not because it is threatening but because of its sheer solidity, its enormous mass, the way it moves through the vegetation with the unstoppable patience of a creature that has nothing to fear from anything except the largest predators. Nearby, smaller and quicker, a group of Lystrosaurus forages through the dry scrub. Lystrosaurus is a dicynodont, a synapsid with a beak and 2 large tusks but otherwise toothless, processing plant material with a combination of biting with the beak and grinding with the jaw. It is stout, compact, perhaps the size of a large pig, and moves with a hurried, slightly waddling gait that somehow suggests anxious industry. Lystrosaurus will prove to be the most important animal of the entire Permian-Triassic boundary, the survivor, the inheritor, the creature that will outlast the greatest extinction the world has ever known and fill the emptied world on the other side. But right now, in the late Permian landscape, it is simply grazing, its tusks digging at the base of a seed fern to expose the moisture-rich roots below. The Permian Ocean is equally extraordinary, though different in character from the land. The last trilobites are here, greatly reduced from their Ordovician peak but still present in some shallow seas, still plowing through the sediment with the same basic body plan they have been using for 270 million years. Unusual reef systems exist, built by organisms with no direct modern equivalents. The first recognizable relatives of modern ray-finned fish are here, swimming through Permian seas in increasing diversity. Ammonites, cephalopods with coiled shells, related to the straight nautiloids of the Ordovician but far more diverse in their shell ornamentation, are becoming a significant presence in Permian marine communities, beginning what will become an extraordinary evolutionary radiation in the Mesozoic. Then, approximately 252 million years ago, something begins. Not a sudden catastrophe, not an asteroid strike, not a single geological event, but a prolonged, terrible unraveling of the conditions that have supported the extraordinary diversity of the Permian world. In what is now Siberia, an enormous volcanic system begins to erupt. Not a single volcano, a vast flood basalt event, one of the largest in Earth's history, where magma wells up through cracks in the crust and flows across the landscape in sheets, burying millions of square kilometers under kilometers of rock, and releasing into the atmosphere carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide and methane in quantities that change the chemistry of the air and the ocean on a global scale. The warming begins slowly. The ocean heats. The chemistry of the seawater shifts as dissolved carbon dioxide makes it more acidic. Marine organisms adapted to specific temperature and chemistry ranges find themselves in conditions their biology cannot accommodate. The corals bleach and die. The reef systems collapse. The trilobites, who have survived every previous extinction event for 270 million years, who outlasted the Ordovician glaciation and the Devonian crisis and the Carboniferous swamp drainage, cannot adapt to the speed of the ocean's chemical transformation. The last trilobite dies. A lineage 270 million years long ends, not with drama, but with the final individual of the final population in some warm Permian sea, living its brief trilobite life and producing no offspring that will survive. On land, the picture is equally grim. The warming and the disruption of atmospheric chemistry affect plant communities first, the forests contract, the interior deserts expand, the food supply for herbivores diminishes and then collapses. Approximately 70% of land vertebrate species disappear. The great Permian world of sailback synapsids and massive dinocephalians and diverse mammaline animals is, over the course of perhaps 60,000 years, a geological instant, largely erased. What remains on the other side is a simplified world, dominated by a handful of tough, adaptable survivors. Lystrosaurus is among them. Lystrosaurus, the stout, tusked, pig-sized herbivore that seemed so ordinary grazing in the Permian scrub, proves to have exactly the right combination of qualities for this new and difficult world. It can eat a wide variety of plant material, it can tolerate a wide range of conditions, it can reproduce quickly. In the early Triassic world immediately after the extinction, Lystrosaurus fossils are found everywhere, every continent, every environment, making up, by some estimates, 90% of all land vertebrate individuals. The world has been simplified to near monoculture. But life has survived. And from this small, hardy foundation, everything that follows will be built. 252 million years ago, the world has survived. This is not a small thing. The end Permian extinction eliminated approximately 96% of marine species and 70% of land vertebrate species, the greatest mass extinction in the history of complex animal life, the event scientists sometimes call the Great Dying. The world on the other side is not the world that came before. It is simpler, quieter, smaller in its biological ambitions, a world that must rebuild itself from what remained, which was very little. You are standing in the early Triassic world, approximately 250 million years ago. The landscape around you is striking in its openness. The Permian had its scrub forests and its seed fern thickets and its diverse plant communities. The early Triassic has much less. The plant communities that managed to survive the extinction are recovering slowly, their diversity greatly reduced, low ferns, horsetails in wet areas, early conifers, but not the rich, layered vegetation of the world before. The ground is open in many places, exposed red-brown rock and thin mineral soil with sparse vegetation cover. The sky above is clear and brilliant blue, the volcanic haze that marked the extinction's worst phases has dissipated, the air chemistry stabilizing, and the sun is intense and the air is dry. What moves through this landscape is, almost entirely, Lystrosaurus. Everywhere you look. In the streambed below you, a group of 6 or 7 Lystrosaurus drinks and then moves off into the scrubby vegetation. On the slope above, another group forages, their beaks and tusks at work on the low plant growth. Further away, at the edge of a dry lake bed, a single large individual rests in the shade of a conifer cluster, its barrel-shaped body half visible. In the early Triassic, walking through this landscape for hours, you might encounter nothing but Lystrosaurus. The extraordinary diversity of Permian vertebrate life has been reduced to this: one genus, one basic body plan, one way of being a land vertebrate animal, filling an emptied world by default rather than by fitness. But already, change is beginning. Life does not stay simple when it is given the opportunity to diversify. The surviving synapsids, the mammal line animals, the group that includes Lystrosaurus and a few other survivors, are beginning to explore new ecological roles in the simplified early Triassic world. Cynodonts, a group of synapsids more closely related to true mammals than Lystrosaurus was, are present and beginning to diversify. These animals are moving toward mammalness in visible ways. Some of them may have had whiskers, some may have had fur or at least partial fur covering, some may have been partially warm-blooded in ways that would eventually become the fully endothermic metabolism of true mammals. They are small, these early cynodonts, and mostly nocturnal in their habits, hiding from the dangers of a world they do not yet dominate. But they are there, in the early Triassic undergrowth, and they are the direct ancestors of every mammal that has ever lived. The oceans are recovering more slowly than the land. The end Permian Ocean was more thoroughly devastated than the terrestrial world. The collapse of marine chemistry was so severe that it took millions of years for ocean ecosystems to return to anything like their previous complexity. The early Triassic ocean is sparse. Fish survive, in reduced diversity. A few cephalopods survive. But the complex reef systems, the diverse communities of invertebrates, the ecological richness of the Permian Sea, these are largely gone, and their rebuilding is slow. The emptied ocean niches will be filled, eventually, by extraordinary new organisms, ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and mosasaurs and the vast diversity of Mesozoic marine life, but that story belongs to the Triassic and Jurassic chapters that follow this one. One of the most important early residents of the Triassic world is not a synapsid but an archosaur, a member of the group of reptiles that will eventually produce crocodilians, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs. Archosaurs had existed in small numbers in the Permian but had been overshadowed by the dominant synapsids. In the early Triassic, with the synapsids reduced to a handful of survivors and most ecological niches empty, the archosaurs begin to diversify rapidly. They are faster than the surviving synapsids. They have more efficient respiratory systems. Their ankle joints, in the early archosaurs, allow for a more erect posture and more efficient locomotion than the sprawling gait of most other Triassic vertebrates. They are, in a word, competitive. Over the course of the Triassic, 252 to 201 million years ago, the Archosaurs split into two main lineages. One lineage, the Pseudotsuchians, produces the crocodilian line, animals like the Rauisuchians, which in the Middle and Late Triassic become the dominant large predators of many land ecosystems. Some Rauisuchians walked with an upright posture, their legs directly beneath their bodies rather than sprawling to the sides, reaching lengths of 6 or 7 meters, filling the ecological role of apex predator that Dimetrodon had occupied in the Permian. The other lineage, the Avemetatarsalia, produces the dinosaurs and the pterosaurs, and this is the line that will eventually inherit the Mesozoic world, though not immediately. The Middle Triassic world, perhaps 230 million years ago, is a world of extraordinary variety in its archosaurs. On land, the Rauisuchians are dominant. In the rivers and lakes, phytosaurs, long snout, aquatic archosaurs convergently similar to modern crocodilians in their body plan, their nostrils positioned near the top of their head behind the long snout, are the apex predators of freshwater environments. Aetosaur, heavily armored herbivorous archosaurs, their backs and sides covered in interlocking bony plates, their short beaks adapted for rooting through vegetation, are the primary large herbivores in many ecosystems. The world is complex and diverse and, to our eyes, almost unrecognizable, dominated by animals that are not dinosaurs, that are not reptiles as we usually imagine them, that belong to groups with no living representatives and no popular cultural presence. But on the margins of this world, small, fast, bipedal, occupying ecological niches that the larger archosaurs overlook, the first true dinosaurs are beginning to appear. Eoraptor, from approximately 231 million years ago, is often cited as among the earliest known dinosaurs. It is small, about a meter long, bipedal, fast on its two hind legs, its teeth suggesting an omnivorous diet, possibly eating small animals and plant material alike. Herrerasaurus, slightly later but also among the earliest, is a larger predator, perhaps 4 meters long, already showing the distinctive hip anatomy that defines the dinosaur lineage. These early dinosaurs are not the rulers of their world. They are one group among many, smaller than the Rauisuchians, less ecologically dominant than the Aetosaur, living in the margins of an ecosystem controlled by other archosaurs. The age of dinosaurs has not yet begun. What it feels like to stand in the late Triassic world, perhaps 210 million years ago, is this. The landscape is open and varied, conifer forests on the higher ground, fern meadows in the lowlands, river systems cutting through red and orange rock, the vegetation beginning to acquire something closer to its modern character though still without flowers or grasses. The air smells of dust and resin and the warm green smell of fern. The sounds are different from any world you have previously visited in this story. There are insects, many more kinds than in the Carboniferous, including the first beetles and the first relatives of flies. There are frogs in the wetlands. There are the first small mammals, tiny, shrew-like, nocturnal, spending the daylight hours in burrows to avoid the archosaur predators that dominate the daylight hours. At dusk, a Coelophysis appears from between the conifers, a slender, graceful dinosaur perhaps 2 meters long, bipedal and quick, its long neck and narrow head giving it the attentive, bird-like quality that many small theropod dinosaurs possess. It moves through the fern meadow with delicate, precise steps, its eyes fixed on something ahead, a large insect, perhaps, or a small lizard-like creature moving through the vegetation. There is something immediately recognizable about Coelophysis, something that you do not feel when watching a Rauisuchian or an Ediasaur, a quality of lightness and speed and directed intelligence that prefigures the birds it will eventually, through hundreds of millions of years of evolution, produce. The dinosaurs are not yet dominant. But watching Coelophysis move through the late Triassic dusk, you can already sense what they will become. The late Triassic evening settles over the landscape. The Rauisuchians have gone to water to rest. The Phytosaurs are active in the river, their eyes just above the surface, their long snouts ready. The Aetosaur are resting in the shade of the conifers, their armor gleaming faintly in the failing light. The small mammals are beginning to emerge from their burrows, cautious and quick. And among the ferns, in the last light, the small dinosaurs move, Coelophysis and its relatives, exploring a world that does not yet know it belongs to them. Tomorrow the world will be exactly as it is today. And the day after. But the forces that will reshape it are assembling, deep in the earth, along a line of volcanic activity that runs through what will eventually become the Central Atlantic Ocean. The next extinction is coming. And the dinosaurs will be on the right side of it. 201 million years ago, the end Triassic extinction begins. Like the end Permian extinction before it, this is not a single moment of catastrophe but a prolonged episode of volcanic disruption, the Central Atlantic magmatic province erupting as the supercontinent Pangaea begins to tear itself apart along what will eventually become the Atlantic Ocean. The rifting produces vast outpourings of basalt lava, releases enormous quantities of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, warms the climate, acidifies the ocean. Species that cannot tolerate the new conditions disappear. And the list of what disappears in the end Triassic extinction reads like a roll call of everything that was not a dinosaur. The Rauisuchians are gone. These large, dominant archosaur predators that had occupied the apex predator role throughout much of the Triassic, some of them walking upright, some of them sprawling, all of them formidable, simply do not survive the end Triassic event. Their fossils appear in late Triassic rocks and then vanish. No Rauisuchians in the Jurassic. No Rauisuchians ever again. The Aetosaur are gone too, those heavily armored herbivores whose fossils are so distinctive and so common in late Triassic deposits simply ceased to appear at the Triassic-Jurassic boundary. The Phytosaurs, those long-snout aquatic archosaurs that had been so successful in Triassic rivers and lakes, disappear as well. A whole complex of highly adapted, ecologically diverse archosaur groups vanishes. The dinosaurs, by contrast, survive. The same dinosaurs that had been small and marginal through most of the Triassic, one group among many, occupying the niches that the dominant Rauisuchians didn't bother with, come through the end Triassic extinction with relatively little damage. The reasons for this differential survival are not entirely clear. The dinosaurs' upright posture and, in some groups, their ability to breathe more efficiently than their competitors may have helped them tolerate the lower oxygen conditions that accompanied the volcanic episode. Their tendency to be somewhat smaller and faster may have made them more adaptable to changing food supplies. Or it may simply be that the extinction was not systematically targeting any particular body plan, that the dinosaurs' survival was partly a matter of chance, of being in the right place at the right time, of having populations distributed in ways that happen to include refugia where conditions remain tolerable. Whatever the reason, the result is clear. At the beginning of the Jurassic period, 201 million years ago, the dinosaurs find themselves in an empty world. The dominant competitors that had kept them marginal throughout the Triassic are gone. The ecological niches that were previously occupied by Rauisuchians and Aeatosaur and the other extinct groups are empty, waiting. And the dinosaurs, released from the competitive pressure that had constrained their diversification throughout the Triassic, begin to radiate, to diversify, to grow, to explore every available ecological role, with extraordinary speed. Within a few million years of the extinction, the world is becoming recognizably dinosaurian. But right now, in the last years of the Triassic, before that radiation has begun, you are standing at the end of everything that came before. The story we have told tonight, 4.5 billion years of Earth history, from the molten Hadean world to the first life in hot springs, from the strange quilted animals of the Ediacaran to the armored fish of the Devonian, from the coal forests and their giant dragonflies to the sailback synapsids of the Permian, from the recovery world of the early Triassic to this moment. This late Triassic evening with its attending complexity of archosaurs and early mammals and experimental dinosaurs, all of that is coming to a close. A chapter is ending. Find a place to sit, in your imagination, in the late Triassic landscape. A flat rock above a river bend, perhaps, where the view extends across a wide valley with conifer forest on the far slopes and the river below catching the last light. The air is cooling as the sun descends. Somewhere below you, a phytosaur slides into the river without a ripple. A small coelophysis emerges from the forest edge, pauses, retreats. The insect chorus is rising as the day cools, the evening insects, the night insects, beginning their various sounds in the vegetation around you. And overhead, the first stars are appearing in the darkening sky. These stars are the same stars you can see tonight. The same constellations, almost, because in 200 million years, the nearest stars have shifted slightly in their positions relative to each other and to us. But the great backdrop of the Milky Way is the same, the stars themselves are mostly the same, burning with the same light. A Triassic evening sky, looked at honestly, is not so different from the sky above your window tonight. The darkness between the stars is the same darkness. The quiet of the sky is the same quiet. What this evening does not know is what comes next. The creatures below you, the phytosaur in the river, the coelophysis at the forest edge, the small mammal ancestors in their burrows, cannot know that the world is about to change. They cannot perceive the volcanic activity beginning on the other side of the world, the slow chemistry shift beginning in the ocean, the chain of consequences that will eliminate most of what exists in this landscape and replace it, over the course of a few 100,000 years, with something very different. They are simply living their late Triassic lives. Alert. Present. Moving through the world that has always been the world, doing what they have always done. And the dinosaurs that will inherit the Jurassic world, the sauropods that will grow to 30 meters long, the theropods that will eventually produce birds, the ornithischians that will produce the great herding animals of the Cretaceous, those animals do not exist yet. They are a potential, not yet a reality. They are evolution waiting to happen, shapes that have not yet been discovered, bodies that have not yet been built. In this late Triassic evening, there is only this, warm rock and cool air and the sound of a river and stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky, and the quiet breathing of a world that does not know it is about to become something else entirely. Everything you have visited tonight, the Hadean fire, the Archean ocean, the first bacteria in their warm vents, the Ediacaran garden, the Cambrian explosion, the great Ordovician reefs, the Devonian fish and forests, the Carboniferous giants, the Permian synapsids, the recovering Triassic world, all of it is behind you now. All of it led here, to this moment, to these stars above a Triassic river valley, to the small creatures in the undergrowth who carry within them the genetic potential for everything that will follow. Including you. You are here because every one of those worlds existed. Because the Cambrian ocean contained a small translucent swimmer with a notochord. Because the Devonian estuary provided mud for a lobe-finned fish to rest upon. Because the Carboniferous undergrowth sheltered a small amniote learning to lay eggs on land. Because Lystrosaurus survived the Great Dying. Because the small, nocturnal mammal ancestors of the Triassic endured the cold nights in their burrows while the Archosaurs slept. Every choice that evolution made, every catastrophe that cleared space for something new, every billion years of patience and chemistry and slow accumulation, all of it was necessary to produce the particular arrangement of atoms that is you, resting here, in this moment, breathing this air that was made by ancient cyanobacteria, warmed by this sun that formed from the same nebula as the Earth, alive in a way that is continuous with the very first life in warm dark water, billions of years ago. The Triassic evening deepens into night. The stars multiply. The river moves. And somewhere in the darkness, a small theropod dinosaur is sleeping, its metabolism running, its heart beating, entirely unaware that the world it knows is already ending and a new world, more extraordinary than anything that has come before, is about to begin. You have traveled a long way tonight. Not in miles, you have not moved from wherever you are lying, whatever position your body has found, whatever blanket or pillow or darkness surrounds you. But in time. In the vast, unimaginable dimension of geological time that most of us move through without ever really pausing to feel. Tonight you have felt it. Or something of it, some fraction of the feeling, some intimation of the depth of what lies behind the present moment. 4.5 billion years. Hold that number gently, without trying to truly comprehend it, because true comprehension is not available to a brain built for human-scale time. The human brain is extraordinarily good at the timescales of a human life. It is adequate at the timescales of history, centuries, millennia. It is overwhelmed by geological time. 1,000,000 years is too large. 1,000,000,000 years is beyond imagining in any direct sense. 4.5 billion years is simply a category of incomprehensibility that we label with a number and let stand at the edge of our cognition, like the horizon, real, but unreachable by walking. What you can feel, though, is this. The rock beneath the building you are in is old. Very old. Most of the rock of the Earth's crust has been recycled, subducted, melted, reformed, multiple times in the planet's history, so the specific rock beneath you may not date back to the Hadean. But the atoms in that rock do. The iron and silicon and oxygen and magnesium that make up that rock were present in the cloud of gas and dust from which the solar system formed, 4.5 billion years ago. They are older than the Earth itself. They are stardust, in the literal sense, forged in the nuclear furnaces of stars that died before the sun existed, scattered as those stars exploded, gathered by gravity into the disk that formed the planets. The rock beneath you is older than the rock it is composed of has ever been in a planetary form. And you are sitting on it. The oxygen in your lungs right now was produced by cyanobacteria. Not the cyanobacteria alive today, though those exist and are doing the same work, but by a lineage of cyanobacteria stretching back 2.5 billion years. The oxygen in the atmosphere has been cycling through living things continuously for that long. Some of the oxygen molecules you breathe in this very breath may have been breathed by a Dimetrodon, may have been produced by a Carboniferous tree, may have drifted above an Ediacaran sea. The atoms are indifferent to their history. They move from environment to environment, from organism to organism, from the deep past to the present, doing the same chemical work they have always done. Your breath is ancient. Your blood is ancient. You are ancient, in the sense that the materials of which you are composed have been participating in this planetary story for as long as the story has existed. Consider the carbon in your body. Carbon is the backbone of all organic chemistry. Every molecule in every cell of your body, every protein, every lipid, every DNA strand, is built on a carbon skeleton. That carbon was once carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It was captured by plants or by the ancestors of plants or by the cyanobacteria that preceded them, incorporated into organic molecules by photosynthesis. It moved through food chains, from plant to herbivore to predator, cycling through the biosphere, being released by respiration and decay, recaptured by photosynthesis, cycling again. The carbon that is you was once a Carboniferous tree. Was once a Permian herbivore. Was once dissolved in the Cambrian Ocean. Was once the body of a trilobite. Was once carbon dioxide in the Hadean atmosphere. There is no carbon in your body that has not been somewhere extraordinary. This is what tonight's journey has been about, underneath the story of the organisms and the extinctions and the extraordinary parade of bodies and worlds and geological epochs. It has been about this connection. About the feeling, not the thought, the feeling, that you are not separate from the history of the earth. That you are not a recent arrival in a world that existed before you and will exist after you, though that is also true. You are a continuation. An expression. A momentary configuration of atoms that have been participating in the story of this planet for its entire existence. The dinosaurs are famous. But the story that produced the dinosaurs is 4 billion years older than the dinosaurs themselves. And the story that produced you is 4.5 billion years old. You are very old. You just do not usually think of yourself that way. Let your body grow heavy now. Let the muscles in your face soften, around your eyes, around your jaw, in the space between your eyebrows. Let your shoulders drop slightly, whatever small tension they carry releasing into the surface beneath you. The ancient rock beneath the building is holding you. The ancient oxygen in the air is sustaining you. The ancient carbon in your cells is doing its quiet chemical work, maintaining you, repairing you, growing you slightly even as you sleep. You are a biological machine of extraordinary antiquity, and right now, the most useful thing you can do is rest. The Triassic evening is still in your mind, perhaps, the stars over the river valley, the sleeping dinosaur, the phytosaur in the dark water. Let it be there if it wants to be. Or let it dissolve, gently, into something simpler, the feeling of warmth, the feeling of weight, the feeling of being held by a planet that has been holding living things for nearly 4 billion years and has never let one go before its time. The story continues, of course. The Jurassic follows the Triassic, and the dinosaurs become the giants you know from museums and films, Brachiosaurus and Stegosaurus and Allosaurus, and the long evolutionary procession toward the Cretaceous, toward Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops and Velociraptor, toward the asteroid and the extinction and the birds that survive it. That story is for another night. Tonight, we have come to the threshold. Tonight, we have seen everything that existed before the great age of dinosaurs, 4 billion years of it, and found it extraordinary. Found it worthy of attention. Found it, in its way, more complex and more various and more full of life than any single period could contain. The world is very old, and very patient, and very full of things that have existed and ceased to exist and been replaced by other things that also cease to exist and are also replaced. Humans are very recent. Dinosaurs were very recent, in geological terms. The true oldness of the world predates all of them. And tonight you have rested in that oldness. You have let it settle around you, the way sediment settles in still water. Slowly. Quietly. Without effort. Until the world is layered and deep and the surface is smooth and the water above it is clear and still. Rest now. The story has no ending, only a pause. And your pause, this sleep, this breathing, this quiet maintenance of a body that contains the chemistry of 4.5 billion years of Earth, is part of the story. It has always been part of the story. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. There is a kind of quiet that exists beneath the surface of things. Not the quiet of absence, not the quiet of a room with no sound in it, but a deeper quiet, a foundational stillness that exists even when the world above it is loud. You find it sometimes in very old places. In the middle of ancient forests where the trees are so large and so still that the air between them seems to have a texture. In the depths of caves where the rock around you has been stone for hundreds of millions of years and the silence has a weight to it. In the moments just before sleep, when the thinking mind releases its grip on the day and something older and quieter rises to take its place. That quiet is where you are going now. You have traveled through enormous time tonight, through worlds of fire and ocean and ice and the slow patient emergence of life, through the first cells and the first eyes and the first footstep on land, through coal forests and Permian deserts and the strange recovery of the Triassic. You have carried a great deal of time with you on this journey. Now you can set it down. The time will keep. The story will keep. The 4.5 billion years will still be there when you wake. Let your breathing find its own rhythm. Not a controlled rhythm, not a practiced rhythm, but the natural rhythm that your body finds when you stop paying attention to it, the rhythm that has been running, unattended, throughout tonight's journey, keeping you alive without any effort on your part. The way a river keeps running whether you watch it or not. The way the heart keeps beating. The way the earth keeps turning. These are the processes that do not require your oversight. They are ancient, and they are reliable, and tonight they are doing their quiet work inside you while you rest. The Carboniferous forest is in your mind somewhere, still. The great dark trunks of the lepidodendron rising into the green shade above. The sound of water between their roots. The distant movement of something large and slow, Arthropleura, perhaps, completing its unhurried circuit of the forest floor. These images have no urgency. They are simply there, the way a dream is there, present but not demanding, vivid but not insistent. Let them be there, or let them dissolve. Either is fine. The mind does what it does, and sleep comes when the mind finally stops trying to direct itself. The Ediacaran Sea is somewhere too. The quiet seafloor with its flat oval forms and its reaching fronds. The water above them warm and clear and entirely still. No currents tonight. No disturbance. Just the slow, barely perceptible existence of the world's first animals, absorbing nutrients through their undersurfaces, growing by the addition of new units at their margins, doing whatever it is that Dickinsonia did for 90 million years in shallow tropical seas, which was not so very different, in its essentials, from what you are doing right now, existing, maintaining, growing slightly, resting. The Archean Ocean is there too, in the very deep background of everything. Dark water under an orange sky. The first cells in their warm vents, too small to see, practicing the chemistry of life with the patient repetition of new processes finding their first reliable forms. There is something profoundly calming about the Archean Ocean, its age, its simplicity, its complete indifference to anything beyond the immediate chemistry of the vent. Nothing is worrying there. Nothing is planning. Nothing is reviewing the day or anticipating tomorrow. There is only warmth and mineral water and the slow replication of molecules that have learned, against all thermodynamic probability, to copy themselves. You are made of that. The copying mechanism in your cells, the DNA replication that has been occurring in every dividing cell of your body throughout your entire life, is descended from whatever process first began in those Archean vents. Not metaphorically descended. Literally, biochemically, unbroken lineage descended. The DNA polymerase enzyme in your cells tonight is a version of an enzyme that existed in the first living things, refined and elaborated over 4 billion years but recognizably continuous with it. Your most fundamental biological process, the maintenance and copying of genetic information, was established before the oceans had free oxygen, before any cell had a nucleus, before any multicellular organism existed anywhere on Earth. You are very, very old. In the most literal biological sense, you are as old as life itself. Let that thought carry you downward, the way a stone carries you to the bottom of a clear pool. Not sinking, you are perfectly supported, perfectly held, but moving into something deeper. The surface of the day is up there somewhere, far above you now, with its thoughts and tasks and concerns and plans. Down here it is quieter. Down here the light is dimmer and the temperature is even and the sounds are reduced to the fundamental, the rhythm of breathing, the distant rhythm of a heartbeat, the continuous and untroubling sound of a mind that has stopped trying to think its way through the night and has surrendered instead to the ancient, reliable processes that have been running since before thought existed. The Ordovician reef is in the deep distance somewhere. The warm clear water. The crinoids swaying on their stalks. The trilobites plowing through the sediment in their patient, ancient way. The small jawless fish grazing at the bottom, their bony plates pressing against the soft sediment, their tiny eyes watching for nothing in particular, simply moving, simply existing in the warm Ordovician afternoon. They do not know they are significant. They do not know they carry within them the architecture of a nervous system that will, given enough time and enough generations, produce you. They are simply there, in the warm water, moving toward food and away from discomfort, doing what living things do. Doing what you are doing now. Moving toward rest. Moving away from the discomforts of wakefulness. Finding the warm dark water of sleep, which is the same in every living thing, a period of reduced activity, of maintenance and repair, of the deep processes that cannot proceed as efficiently in wakefulness. Fish sleep. Insects sleep. Reptiles sleep. The first animals probably slept, in their way, resting in the warm Ediacaran shallows, their chemistry running at its nighttime pace, their existence temporarily quieter. Sleep is ancient. It is as ancient as consciousness, perhaps older. Whatever triggered the evolution of sleep, and there are many theories, it was something that the first animals encountered and found necessary, something so fundamental to the maintenance of a complex nervous system that every complex nervous system since has required it. You are part of an unbroken lineage of sleeping things. From the first animal that rested in the Ediacaran Sea to the mammals sleeping in the late Triassic undergrowth to the first humans sleeping in whatever shelter the night offered them, unbroken, continuous, ancient. Your sleep tonight connects you to all of that. It is not a small thing, sleep. It is one of the most ancient behaviors in the animal kingdom, one of the most fundamental requirements of the kind of life you are. And tonight, surrounded by the deepest history you can access, you are doing it. You are sleeping. You are being what you have always been, an animal, resting, in a world that is very old and very patient and very full of time. The world is still turning. Right now, as you lie still, the Earth is rotating on its axis at the equator at a speed of approximately 1600 kilometers per hour. You do not feel this. You never feel this. The motion is too smooth, too consistent, too long established to register as motion at all. It is simply the condition of existing on a rotating planet, a condition that has been the case for 4.5 billion years and that will continue for approximately 5 billion more, until the sun expands to a red giant and the inner planets are consumed. Tonight, you are inside that long arc. You are a brief brightness in a very long story. The continents are moving. Not at a speed you can perceive, they move at roughly the rate your fingernails grow, but they are moving. Tonight, the Atlantic Ocean is slightly wider than it was last year. The Himalayas are infinitesimally taller. The San Andreas Fault has shifted by some imperceptible amount. The Pacific Plate is subducting beneath the North American Plate, dragging the ocean floor down into the mantle where it will be melted and eventually return to the surface through volcanic activity, continuing the cycle of rock creation and destruction that has been operating since the Hadean. The Earth is not static. The Earth has never been static. It is a dynamic system, always in motion, always being remade. The cyanobacteria are still at work. Right now, in the ocean, in the billions of square kilometers of ocean that cover most of the planet's surface, cyanobacteria and their photosynthesizing descendants are absorbing sunlight and producing oxygen. They have been doing this for 2.5 billion years. They will continue doing it for the foreseeable future. The oxygen in your lungs tonight is a product of their continuous, uninterrupted, 2.5 billion year labor. Every breath you take is a gift from the ancient bacteria. Every breath has always been this. Somewhere in the deep ocean, near hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, bacteria are living in conditions almost identical to those of the Archean, hot, mineral-rich, oxygen-free, utterly dark. These bacteria have been in that environment for billions of years, essentially unchanged, because the environment has been essentially unchanged. They are the closest thing to living Archean organisms that exists on Earth today. They are contemporaries of yours, alive right now, in the deep ocean, in the dark, but they are also, in a functional sense, time travelers from 4 billion years ago. The world has changed enormously around them. They have changed very little. The trilobites are gone, of course. The placoderms are gone. The sailback synapsids, the Rawasuchians, the phytosaurs, the Aetosaur, all gone. The vast coal forests are compressed into rock. The Cambrian seafloor is lithified into limestone. The Ediacaran garden is preserved in stone in a handful of locations around the world, the impressions of creatures whose kingdom may have no living representatives. All of the worlds you visited tonight are gone, in the sense that they exist now only in rock and in the chemistry of living things that descended from them. But gone is not the same as lost. The record is there. The story is preserved. The rock remembers. And you are here, which is perhaps the most remarkable thing. You are here because the lobe-finned fish found the mudflat. You are here because the small amniote learned to lay eggs on land. You are here because Lystrosaurus survived the Great Dying. You are here because the Triassic mammals endured the long nights in their burrows while the Archosaurs dominated the daylight world. You are here because of an unbroken chain of survival and reproduction and gradual transformation that stretches from the first cell in the Archean ocean to the parents who produced you and the childhood that shaped you and the person you have become. That chain has never been broken. Not once, in 4.5 billion years, has your lineage failed to produce a living offspring that survived to reproduce. The chain is unbroken. You are the current end of it. There is something restful in that thought, if you let it be restful rather than daunting. You did not have to do anything to be here. You did not have to earn your place in the lineage. You simply are the latest expression of something that has been expressing itself for 4.5 billion years. The work was done. The chain was maintained. And here you are, tonight, the current leading edge of an ancient and continuous story, resting in the way that living things have been resting since animals first existed. The breathing slows. Or it has already slowed, it may have slowed an hour ago, without your noticing, the long slow drift of the story carrying your wakefulness gradually downward the way a river carries a leaf toward a slow bend, without urgency, without effort. The thoughts, if there are thoughts, have a different quality now, less directed, less sequential, more associative, more image-based. A trilobite seen from above, rolling into its defensive ball. The sail of a Dimetrodon glowing in the morning light. The Meganeura dragonfly settling onto a lepidodendron trunk in the Carboniferous dusk. These images require nothing of you. They are simply there, and they are beautiful, and they pass. The Archean ocean, very dark and very warm. The first light of the Hadean sun, filtered through an orange sky, falling on a world that has no eyes to see it. Stromatolites in the Proterozoic shallows, building their slow monuments of calcium and time. The quiet garden of the Ediacaran, the flat forms of Dickinsonia on the smooth seafloor, the fronds of Charnia reaching upward in the warm clear water. Anomalocaris in the Cambrian Sea, moving through the sunlit water above the reef with the unhurried grace of the world's first great predator. The nautiloids of the Ordovician, their long shells gleaming. The forests of the Devonian, the first proper shadows, the first forest smell. The coal forests. The Permian desert at dawn. Lystrosaurus grazing in the early Triassic scrub. Coelophysis moving through the late Triassic dusk. All of it is behind you now. All of it is also inside you, not as memory, not as thought, but as the chemistry and architecture of the body you inhabit, shaped by 4.5 billion years of the process that produced it. You carry the whole story. You are made of the whole story. And right now, the story is resting. The story is breathing. The story is allowing itself to be still in the darkness, for as long as the darkness lasts. Sleep well. The world is old and patient, and it will be here when you wake. Our journey through the world before dinosaurs has come to its quiet end. You have traveled through 4.5 billion years of Earth history tonight, through fire and ocean and ice, through the first breath of life and the extraordinary parade of worlds that followed. All of that time is in the rock around you, in the air above you, in the chemistry of every cell of your body. You are continuous with all of it. As you continue to rest, you will now hear soothing sounds to accompany your sleep throughout the night, without any advertisements or interruptions, creating the perfect atmosphere for deep and peaceful rest. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us continue making more content. Anyways, see you in the next one. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams carry you somewhere ancient and warm and full of wonder. The trilobites are resting. The stromatolites are breathing. The Archean ocean is dark and still. And somewhere in the deep quiet of the world before everything you know, there is a place for you to rest as well. Let yourself go there now. Which prehistoric world surprised you most tonight, and if you could visit any one of the worlds from before the dinosaurs, where in deep time would you go? Let us know in the comments below.